Um, the focus of the Albert Einstein Institution, where I've been privileged to work with the scholar Gene Sharp for the past 10 years, is to research the use and historical use of nonviolent means of struggle and to promote its use in place of both violence and passivity in acute conflicts taking place around the world. So we do this by looking at the historical use of nonviolent means of struggle. Overwhelmingly, when people have used this technique, it's been for pragmatic reasons, not because of their belief system or a principled rejection of violence. It's because they were actually searching for a better and more powerful way to fight. So when people have wanted to produce social, political, and economic change, how have they done so? And I'm talking about moving beyond simply protesting policies or expressing dissatisfaction to actually producing change and doing it self-reliantly. How have they done it? When it's worked, why has it worked, and how has it worked? And when it's failed, what are the factors that have contributed to failure? Because we can actually learn from those mistakes as well. We think that there are a great number of lessons that can be gained from this study of history that can contribute to greater effectiveness for groups struggling for social and political change today. The claim by virtually every group we've met with is that their situation is completely unique, but that's only partly true. There are general problems and general characteristics of empires, of occupations, of dictatorships, and also of nonviolent means of struggle that can offer very valuable lessons for those struggling for greater rights and freedoms. I have a short trailer from a new documentary about our work that I'd like to show, I'm warning you, it's quite dramatic. And so if you're in the process of waking up, I think you'll certainly be awake after this.
To be counted as a threat to a tyrant is a matter of pride, I would say. It means we're effective. It means we're relevant. It means out of this very small office, we produce work that threatens regimes.
Gene Sharp's tactics and theories are being practiced on the streets of Syria as we speak now.
It shows that what Gene was talking about year after year after year, there are realistic alternatives to violent conflict.
Unless they have something instead of violence and war, they will go back for violence and war every time.
The film premiered in September of this year, and since then it's been disseminated all over the world and probably been viewed close to by 10 million people, at least on channels around the world. But it's also been disseminated very widely in places where showing this film carries great risk. So it's been a very eventful and interesting year for us at the Albert Einstein Institution and those of us who have been doing this work for many years. The events of the past 15 months have brought about a new awareness about the choices that people have in facing difficult problems. A number of my panelists have spoken about the erosion of fear that we have witnessed. This breakthrough is largely thanks to the bravery of people in Tunisia and Egypt and elsewhere. It's a new understanding of the power of ordinary people and the weaknesses of dictatorships. I would maintain that this has far-reaching and extremely important consequences. Recent events have dispelled some of the common misconceptions that people have historically held about this technique of action and also about the weakness of dictators and its relevance for groups worldwide. The events in the Middle East have sparked a debate among people throughout the world about whether these events could prove to be a model to bring about democratic change in other countries. Many people pointed to the fact that the revolutions in Egypt and Tunisia were conducted without help from outside powers, including the distrusted United States. People in many different countries, including our own, dealing with diverse challenges, are now asking, what about us? Can this technique provide political means to address the problems that we face? This is all very encouraging. People are learning that they need not resort to violence or passivity in the face of oppression or injustice. However, this new awareness alone is not enough, because between the awareness and effective action that can lead to more successful struggles is a very important intermediate step, and that is a detailed study about how this technique operates, factors that contribute to success and failure, and how it can be applied in future conflicts and contribute to bringing about more democratic societies. As we know, no easy, simple, or safe answer exists to the problem of how to block or undermine dictatorships or oppressive systems effectively and to ensure the establishment of durable freedoms. The question, however, is not how can America bring democracy to other countries, but how can we develop and help make available the tools that will enable people themselves to struggle for freedom. I would argue that our role is extremely limited, but very important. The analyses and studies that are prepared by the Albert Einstein Institution and others have been reported to be helpful to individuals and groups who wish to explore the potential of these means for their situations. The literature that we have available on our website or in printed form is of a generic nature. It's not written to address the problems that are faced by any specific country. Our policies forbid us from telling people what to do or even that they should do something. We don't give specific advice, in part because it very likely would be wrong. We think that effective strategies that actually have a chance of working need to come from groups inside the country and develop organically. They also require a detailed knowledge of the situation, information that outsiders usually don't have. External involvement at the planning level is dangerous, and it's not empowering for groups to receive ready-made plans from abroad. However, there are ways that educational material can be strengthened that can be very important for groups. Because our work is generic and transpartisan, that's a word that was developed by one of my colleagues some years ago, it means it doesn't require a belief in a particular ideology. Rather, it can be used for a variety of objectives, including ones we may not agree with. If we want to reduce a reliance on violence as an instrument of policy, we have to give people another way to fight that is at least as powerful and effective as violence. This pragmatic piece is, in my view, probably one of the most attractive parts of our work for people who have contacted us over the years. Our writings are distributed among individuals from a range of countries and situations with very diverse backgrounds and views on nearly every continent. In fact, there's a part in the film where Gene Sharp says that our writings have been used on all continents except Antarctica. But when the film aired in Australia, we received a call that actually the books had made their way to Antarctica, where the environmental movement was studying them. So one publication in particular, which we saw in the film briefly, is From Dictatorship to Democracy. This book alone has been an important factor in the worldwide dissemination of these ideas. Since it was written, it's spread almost completely on its own. We're a very small organization that maybe didn't come out from the film. We're 3 people. But some of the work was produced in years where funding was much better, and we had a larger staff and a bigger office. To date, that book has been translated into 35 languages, and there are 15 more that are currently in preparation. Over the past decade, as opposition groups around the world began to better communicate with each other and also learn from one another, to some degree, of course, facilitated by the internet and other technologies, demand for and interest in our writings has dramatically increased. Over the course of 1 month in June 2009, following the election unrest in Iran, downloads of Farsi language material increased something like 4,000%. Groups from around the world began contacting us to ask us how they too could develop strategies for their particular objectives. So since we couldn't tell them what to do, we began to think about what is it that people need to know, and how is that information best conveyed and understood by them so that it can actually lead to greater effectiveness in what they're doing already. We think that the chances of a nonviolent struggle being successful can be greatly increased by acting in accordance with a plan, a wise plan, preferably. A wise plan requires careful thinking. That's identifying the characteristics of the present situation, what needs to be done, when, why, and how to do it, all while countering the repression that is to be expected from your opponent. Throughout history, these means have been used with great effectiveness in an improvised fashion, often spontaneously. Rarely we've seen great strategic geniuses like Gandhi. But relying on intuition can lead to defeat and is very dangerous. With access to this important material, it's now possible to make nonviolent struggles more effective than they have been in the past. As Gene Sharp says, now groups engaged in nonviolent struggles no longer need to reinvent the wheel. It's with this need in mind that we also developed another publication. You can see the trend here. We're dealing with research and putting out publications. So our newest book is Self-Liberation, a guide to strategic planning for action to end a dictatorship or other oppression. Quite a mouthful. It's available also from our website. Gosh, I need to cut this down. So I'm going to make an important point in the time I have remaining. There's an important lesson that can be gained from observation of last year's events. The collapse of an oppressive regime will be seen by some individuals and groups as an opportunity to install themselves as the new masters. A coup can occur during the course of a struggle and following the collapse of a regime and following a successful struggle. Care must be taken to prevent the rise of a new oppressive regime out of the confusion following the collapse of a regime. It's therefore very important to calculate how to prevent an initial success from being stolen by a coup or other illegal takeover of a government. We've got a publication that deals with that also. It's called The Anti-Coup, but you could look it up on our website. But I just want to say that I think it's unrealistic to expect that a successful nonviolent struggle for a particular objective will achieve that objective, but also solve every problem in the society. Those who expect that nonviolent struggles will produce a perfect society will be disappointed. We need to be very careful to avoid assessing the recent very impressive struggles as failures because problems still exist in those societies. It is now important that we continue to refine this technique. This field is still relatively new. Those of us who are working for a less violent and a more just world can contribute to these efforts, because you can be very sure that opponents of democracy are studying the technique in order to learn how to undermine and defeat it. Increasingly, people are concentrating on learning how to apply nonviolent struggle so skillfully and effectively that violence and military means are not needed. If nonviolent struggle can be responsibly and wisely applicable instead of violence in situation after situation, violence for good purposes in politics can be gradually left behind. It may become an unneeded earlier way of fighting. If this can be done progressively over time in the types of situation in which violence is now deemed to be required, a major historical change will have occurred. Thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.